This class was the first class that had me consider why I make art and what the philosophy behind my creativity is. It took me a while to narrow it down. I still feel like I haven't done so completely. How can you narrow down something so amorphous and abstract? But after some reflection, looking at the broad strokes of all forms of art that I participate in, writing, role-playing, drawing, singing, playing instruments, I realized that the issues of my own life always seem to seep into these escapist play sessions no matter what I do. I want to be someone who encourages different forms of self-expression through art and all forms of temporary escapism. Someone who helps connect people through similarities in their own respective worlds they've created. Someone who encourages connections and working through traumas in our own weird and wacky ways. This is my creative philosophy. Make people feel seen while still having fun in our own fantasy environments. I would not be the first creative to try and do this sort of thing. Humans can have a very difficult time coming up with anything entirely original. They always seem to draw inspiration from the history occurring around them. Stories that include war, racial issues, and disease, however hidden under layers of fantasy buzzwords, are simply ways for artists to re-examine the war, racial issues, and disease around them. Art imitates life and vice versa, and a prime example of how real-world issues have been tackled through art is the Lord of the Rings movie franchise. One of the most fantastical stories with extensive world-building of fake place names, hierarchies, species, customs, food, everything. Over 500,000 words of stories that are almost completely disconnected from the culture of the author itself. However, intrinsically woven into the narrative of fantasy are the real-world horrors of World War I that Tolkien himself witnessed. An article from Screen Rant puts it this way. Tolkien's experiences as a soldier during the First World War understandably shaped his literary magnum opus, and it's no coincidence that The Lord of the Rings centers around a war to end all wars. However, the influence of Tolkien's time in the trenches runs far deeper than the basic premise. The author's grandson, Simon Tolkien, notes several connections between the real-life horrors of the Great War and the struggle of elves and men against a great unseen evil. The industrial machinations of Saruman and Sauron used to manufacture and equip their armies are comparable to the lethal technological advances made throughout World War I, while Simon likens the bond between the four main hobbits as a representation of the camaraderie between soldiers forced to spend days and nights in close proximity. Perhaps more significantly, Frodo's inability to return to everyday life after his experience in Mordor is said to be a reflection of how veterans would struggle to assimilate back into civilization once the war had ended. Tolkien was not the only person to get some form of emotional growth and/or closure from the stories that he wrote after he came back from the war. Erica Secor discusses in a Nerdist article how studying the lessons put forth by the Lord of the Rings movies helped her cope with the death of her mother. Andy Malinsky goes over how Lord of the Rings teaches people to get out of their comfort zones in his article from Psychology Today. My own mother frequently uses the Lord of the Rings films as an escape. Lord of the Rings is a prime example of how fantasy and escapism can reflect the issues we face in our everyday lives, allowing us to re-examine them in a new light and come to our own conclusions about what to do next. This is just how I want my art to affect people. I want it to make their lives better while also providing some temporary entertainment. This is my creative philosophy.